taking inventory or having these conversations is beneficial both for the questioner, but also for the responder, right? You, by asking the question, are benefiting from the response. And the responder is benefiting from feeling seen and voicing their thoughts, their opinions, their journey, their experience. Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot.
Post-pandemic, it feels as though our social skills have atrophied.
It feels like the barrier to entry to meeting new people and cultivating community is higher than ever before, but we believe that meaningful relationships are the key to a fulfilling life.
So we're ditching the surface level conversations to ask and answer questions all about human connection. Join us in creating something more human. So we just wrapped up the August book club for the Something More Society. We read The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, and we're incredibly inspired by the idea that she poses for grounding in purpose for a gathering. She's really talking about in-person gatherings throughout the book, but Elliot and I have been talking a lot about this as a gathering, like the two of us just sitting on the couch is a gathering. Us talking with you is a gathering. The way that we're developing the Something More Human community is a gathering. And so even though this is virtual, why not think about grounding us in purpose every time we gather? So for this episode, we're really thinking about purpose as how and why it's important to be a better conversationalist, and what does that actually look like. We've talked before about the power of a question, but we haven't really gone into the nitty-gritty, and we wanted to take the time to really talk about what are powerful questions, how do we develop powerful questions, and why it's even important.
I know that this is part of what's to come later, but the thing that keeps running through my mind is that one of the things that we keep hearing people say is that when meeting new people or just maintaining friendships is that the other person's not asking them enough questions. And I think that's a major point of contention. And also I think it is kind of like, try this one simple trick for a better friendship. I think that it does start with like better questions, like asking more questions or being conscientious of it and finding new questions to ask your friends to get to know them on a deeper level. That's really what it's about. And it does seem overwhelming, but that's what this episode's for. But it really is just a question. And we're going to talk about the power of those questions.
So this can be applied both to when you're meeting someone new for the first time or meeting up with an acquaintance, as well as friendships that you already have. We have, on the show in general, talked a lot about like meeting new people for the very first time, building new friendships from scratch. So this conversation we're going to frame through deepening relationships that you already have.
Yeah, we do talk a lot about meeting new people, but what about the people that just want to get better at the ones they already have,
So I think that when we talk about being a good conversationalist, it can often be easy to think about like, oh, that person's just really extroverted and they are just naturally great, and this person's more introverted and they just don't have that skill. I challenge you to reframe that thinking, and these are skills and muscles that we can build and grow over time. I do recognize that Elliot and I probably fall under that category of people who are maybe just sort of more naturally gifted at conversing. I definitely, as a kid, every single report card and parent-teacher conference left with, Samantha's doing great, her grades are awesome, she's a joy to have in class, but she's quite the social butterfly.
Yeah, do you remember the report card, or not the report card, sorry. Did you have like the cards for each student? And they each had pockets, and like when you got called on for interrupting or for something bad, you would pull a card and like it would be different colors, and the further you got along, basically the more trouble that you were in throughout the day.
I didn't really get in very much trouble.
And I'm like, wow, like you're making these kids take a walk of shame every single time to pick up a card and like put it in their folder. And then you can always just like reference, everyone can like look back at the poster on the wall of all of these different students and how many cards they have and what color they're on. And I was always like on the edge, like you, just like, Elliot's, good at reading and he's doing great at math, but like he talks way too fucking much.
Surely that's exactly what your 7th grade teacher said.
But also I feel like I'm realizing more and more now, especially lately, I'm good when like I'm hanging out with people, like I'm good meeting new people, but I'm not putting myself out there very much to even like call on friends to like hang out. Like I'm getting kind of on that side. And I think part of it's natural, but some of it maybe is me recognizing that and needing to be the one to reciprocate.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like I spend a lot of alone time on myself. I have been lately. And that if no one hit me up, I just wouldn't hang out at all. And maybe I'm just in that season.
Certainly.
You know?
That's possible.
But anyway.
We've talked about this quote really early on in the show, but I want to kind of full circle moment. Tony Robbins, who, if you don't know, is a really prolific personal development person in the space. He has this quote that really, really resonates with me, which is the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask. He's mostly talking about personal development and maybe entrepreneurship, but I think as we think about conversations with people that we care about, that is an excellent North Star. So how are we considering the quality of the questions that we bring into a conversation? And we'll get into some strategies because Elliot mentioned, like, there's a million possibilities of what you could ask. So how do you know what to even ask?
Yeah, and I wanted to get specific and tell a personal story or an example, which is that, I mean, I've told this a few times on the show since moving to Denver, like going to the park and seeing a bunch of people in a group, having fun and thinking, holy shit, like, I wish I had that friend group,
Mm-hmm.
Not realizing that the 15 people that are there, there's a very good chance that many of them don't even know each other, And I think I've been looking at my friends in my community from like a glass half empty perspective for a long time, instead of realizing like the friends you already do have and what a gift that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, so for those who are, wanting to meet new people, that's great too. But for those who maybe find themselves where I am, which is like finding yourself complaining about the lack of community instead of like looking at the relationships that you have and nurturing those and being honest about those and thinking about them and maybe even giving them like a grade, setting up some rules for yourself for each, writing them down, giving them a grade, finding the one that, maybe you could do better on and focus on doing better on that, focus on cultivating that relationship and maintaining it by starting with, a question that you probably have never asked them before.
Mm-hmm. I think we're all in life seeking to be seen in the world. And so when we're thinking about conversations, asking ourselves the question, how can we create a culture or create an environment where we are allowing the other person to see us and we are seeing them?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I think the power of the question comes in.
Sure.
And like you said at the beginning, the most common complaint that people report from their social interactions, whether it's a first date, catching up with someone over coffee, is they didn't ask me anything about myself, or, oh, I wish they would have asked me more questions.
Yeah, this isn't really rooted in science, but like we're speaking from our own unique perspective. We've had friends and acquaintances that have told us if we start getting on this conversation, that the one thing that they're really disappointed in sometimes with a potential friendship or relationship is that this other person's just not asking any questions. Like they're, just responding.
Yeah, even
what do you
if
think that is? What do you think that's about? How do you feel about that?
I think that there's two sides of the same coin. One is like being in an individualistic culture, which does not promote meaningful relationships and instead promotes parasocial relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like individualistic culture is one side of the coin, and the other side of the coin is like the literal muscle of interaction and participating in society has atrophied, which is what we say on the show a lot. The way that we are operating now is through like our social skills having atrophied. So what are we actually doing to build the muscle and the skill back up?
Why do you think there's such a push to make everything easy and effortless? Why is there such a push, like with AI and with different tools at your disposal? Like, what is the obsession with making everything easier? Like, why was making friends in the 90s, or I mean, whenever in your life or in previous history, was it ever super difficult? In fact, it's become more difficult now, even though things are supposed to be easier than ever. So like, there was nothing wrong with the way we met. Mm-hmm. So why is there such a focus on making things so much easier to do, like finding a friend online or finding, a potential mate online? Like, what is this push with things being easier? Does it have to do with productive output too? Do you think that?
Yeah, I was going to say, honestly,
it's capitalism, right? Like they want us to do even more than we've already been doing, and make all the other things that we do outside of work easier to do, so we have more time to work.
Yeah, my answer is capitalism. I think that we are not generating income for someone else by going to the park with our friends. right? So like we have less time, and if we are pushing productivity and efficiency, then we are also devaluing, like only one thing can be at the top at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just not, as a culture, a priority. And you talk about the pendulum swinging, like I do sense that there's a desire for the pendulum to come back and for us to return to genuine and meaningful human connection. Definitely. Which is kind of the point of the show.
And it leads right into you and I discussing earlier on about the balance between like asking the question, but actually listening to the response, like talking and listening actively and with mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to probably focus most of this conversation on the half of what a conversation takes, the talking part. But you're making a great point that that's only half of the secret sauce. The other half is really listening and being present to their response.
Mm-hmm. And it's pretty relevant after reading 10% Happier and then interviewing Dan about his book. And he didn't really specifically mention, or not that I can remember, you know, I think a little bit he did with active listening, but about how much like the practice of meditation equals the practice of mindfulness makes you a better listener. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone. Like if you can be objective, like for you and I, you're the better listener, but you're also a much more mindful person. And my heads are always in the clouds, you know, and I'm always looking back or struggling with staying in the present moment. And also I do worse at listening than you do. And I think those are directly related. So I think like if you could practice mindfulness and being in the present moment, it not only it does many other good things for, you know, your brain, but also I think it immediately makes you a better friend because you're asking a question and you're actually listening to the entire answer without thinking about how you're going to respond to their response. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think going straight into our first strategy, one of the things that keeps us in our head is, what should I ask them? And figuring out what the question is going to be. And so you're doing thinking instead of listening and absorbing. So my first strategy for us and everyone is have some questions pre-planned. My favorite question lately has been, we do some Q&As in the Something More Society, and someone asked, what is your favorite dinner party question? This is hands down my answer as of late.
It's pretty crazy to think how many times you've had the opportunity to ask people this, which is cool.
But I've been doing it a lot.
You've asked it, like I would say, at least 5 times in the last month or 2.
And it's super fun. Okay, so it's a 2-parter. I think I've talked about this on the show before. The first part is, of the 7 deadly sins, which are you and why? And the second part is, you know, ending on a high note, of the 7 virtues, which are you and why? I love this question because A, it's super fun and like kind of novel. I've never thought about myself in this way. And 2, it gives you an opportunity to understand kind of 2 spectrums, or each end of the same spectrum of a person. I have some others that I just pulled from the internet to give. Take this question, steal it, put it in your back pocket.
Can I really quick tell you why I like it?
Yeah.
Because it's light and heavy. I think that what's good about it is, even though, you know, you've been pitching this to friends that we've had in Denver, those are all still questions that you've never asked them. So inevitably you're going to find out something about them that you don't know. But what's good about it is that there's like light and heavy, and there's a lot of options. Like you can choose gluttony, even if yours isn't gluttony, or you can choose, you know, the lesser of the evils. Do you know what I mean? And still have the conversation. And I don't know, I just like the power of the question because you can choose not to be honest if you're in a pinch, which I guess is a bad thing, but at least they're still playing the game. Am I just going in circles?
Are you saying that you like this question because you can lie?
I don't think I'm saying it's because you can lie. I think that's because there's so many options and it ends on a light note, because it is kind of heavy. Like some people might take that pretty literally. Essentially, what are you the worst at? What is your biggest vice in life?
Yeah.
That's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But then to follow it up with, okay, and like, how are you good? Some people don't like talking about how they're good. But if you can ask a question that gives them the opportunity to do that, that's a beautiful thing. Do you know what I mean? When was the last time that they put themselves in that situation? And I think forcing their hand essentially is a good practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to grounding and purpose. What is the purpose of the question? For me, the purpose of asking this is to have a little fun and to understand them better. This is a question that how would I have learned these things about this person without this question? Okay, so here are some other questions that I just pulled. So if you're feeling the pressure of coming up with a question just straight from your brain, just steal one of these, put them in your back pocket for the next time you're catching up with a friend. What are 3 things that you think we have in common? This is a question that I think you and I asked each other very early on, and it is, it's tough, but it's fun, I think, to also challenge ourselves. I used to find myself befriending a lot of people that were opposite me. And so it's a really fun challenge. Is there something that you've dreamed of doing for a long time? Why haven't you done it? Or have you done it? What does friendship mean to you? And what is important for me to know about you?
Now, tell me about the vehicle in which these are asked, because I feel like that part really matters. I'm thinking of someone listening who's like, well, those are so seemingly unnatural questions that people don't normally ask. So like, they might be thinking, oh, that's going to be kind of awkward. And, we as a society care about optics, even if they're really good friends and we fart in front of them. Like, sometimes we just care too much about what people think, So like, should you come with those questions like written down? Like, how do you prepare your friends for that? Are you doing it by surprise? Are you preparing them? Is it sort of like game mode? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, how do you, instead of just asking them at the dinner table, like sort of take us through that process of the logistics of the delivery?
Yeah, I think choose your own adventure and do what's right for you. For me, I'm a little bit more comfortable just saying like, I have a question for the group, or I've been posing this at all my favorite dinner parties. If you want to give people kind of a heads up that you're going to like throw a curveball. We've also talked a lot on the show about bold action. And I think that although we usually talk about it in the context of like getting your art out there or taking a bold move or introducing yourself to a stranger, this also relates to the confidence of posing a pointed question to someone and the self-consciousness that might come along with being perceived as like too much or too forward or too aggressive. And going back to purpose, the purpose is to get to know them on a deeper level, right? So you can just say, if you want to do game mode, I have a couple of questions that I'd love to ask you. I'd love to speed round some questions to get to know each other better. I care about our relationship and I'd love to understand you better. Hey, I was listening to a podcast recently. They posed these questions. I'd love to pose them to you.
Yeah, I love that.
I think do what feels right for you. For me, I'm totally fine just throwing the curveball out there.
Yeah.
And if you might not be, blame us.
What was interesting for me as you're saying that, talking about just listening and not waiting for my turn to speak, but what I had been thinking about even earlier was that the reason that I enjoy Art of Gathering so much was that also what we are not really taking into consideration is like the place that these questions take place at. You would be most comfortable asking those questions right behind us at the dinner table. So that matters too, right? Like you wouldn't do that at a soft opening of a restaurant or at a bar. Maybe you would. I guess that's not necessarily true, but I guess what I'm saying is that the place matters too.
Environment matters.
Right? So like, obviously you have to be comfortable where you're at to tell this. You're not going to tell it anywhere. But for you, is this where you would most likely tell it, just at the dinner table?
I would say over dinner for sure. I love the way that food and drink connect us. And that's, the whole purpose of like the art for the show. But I'll give another example that I thought worked well. We were at Run Club, and the Run Club ends at a coffee shop. So we usually spend 2 hours together. We run for the first like 45-ish minutes, and then we spend another hour chit-chatting at the coffee shop. And someone just asked us, like, how did your interview with Dan go? How did your interview with Ben go? And we were telling them about it. We were telling them about the conference. We were telling them about questions that we've had in mind and what we've been inspired by lately. And Ramon said, can I take that question and turn it on the group? And then we went around, and I felt like that was an excellent moment to leverage inspiration, to pose a new and pointed question to the group, and to develop the relationships even though we were out in public.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I don't think it necessarily needs to be private, but perhaps the level of intimacy and the environment of that is where you're getting.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. They also talk about the size of the gathering,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it was only 5 of us that day.
Yeah, something like that.
Right?
5.
What
6?
question did he turn around back on us?
When was the last time a stranger made you feel loved?
That was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And there was someone new at the group who we had just met.
Mm-hmm.
And still we had a very, very, very fruitful conversation with her. She was very forthcoming about basically anything that was asked of her, you know, that was special. And I think that it wouldn't have been as comfortable to do in front of like 10 or 15 or 20 people.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it was outside, so it was sort of private. So there weren't a ton of people listening.
Mm-hmm.
So those things just end up making the difference sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So strategy 1 is having questions pre-planned. Take these questions, stick them in your back pocket. But another part of the volley of conversation is follow-up questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you take a question and then go deeper instead of like, okay, well, here's question number 2 and number 3 and number 4. So strategy number 2 is think about asking questions that are geared more towards someone's feelings or experience rather than questions that have a finite answer. What are you laughing at?
I'm having the craziest thought that this video could be a how-to for like robots in the future learning how to be human beings and ask questions.
This could be a machine learning education video.
Literally.
So what I mean by this is instead of asking somebody, what do you do? Oh, I'm a teacher. There's kind of, it's a little bit, unless you're also a teacher or like your mom's a teacher or like someone you love is a teacher, it's kind of hard to take that answer and then like run with an exciting conversation. Instead, asking or following up with how did you get into that line of work? We went to a journalist meetup. And instead of asking, have you ever been to one of these before? Which is a question I find myself asking a lot at networking events. Oh, have you ever been to this group before? Have you ever come to this meetup before? Yes. It's hard to move the conversation forward. She asked me, how did you end up here? And instead of saying, oh, I just saw a newsletter, I really had the opportunity to give her a story. We started this podcast in November. I'm understanding that we're in media and fall under that umbrella. I subscribed to Corey's newsletter. I saw it here. I emailed you. We'd been talking over email, and I really had an opportunity to give her a story, arc, and journey. And she learned so much more about us through that question, and infinitely more than if she had asked, have you been here before?
Mm-hmm. Great point. And if the alternate realities do exist, that conversation might have been over pretty quick.
Definitely.
You know?
And it can sometimes feel like pulling teeth. And often I think I feel that way when I am getting trapped in asking questions with finite answers, as opposed to asking about sort of someone's experience or journey or feelings about something.
Right.
Even honestly, when in doubt, like who, what, how, when, why, you do an excellent job of doing that. You often ask, like, what is that about? Or what do you think that, why do you think that is? You did it earlier. And I think that that's not a question that comes to my mind naturally. And practicing digging one level deeper in that way is a great way to keep the conversation moving.
Totally. I don't know. It feels like, first it feels like the natural thing to do, but it almost feels like a form of research, like doing research on somebody is just like getting down to the essence of who they are, you know? When Ramona and I were first meeting, I remember I just kept asking like, why? And then it got real, you know? It wasn't even really a conscious thought. I was just like, well, I want to know more. Like, what is the reason for this? Like, why did you choose to do this? And I think it's like the 6 degrees of separation. I think 6 whys, you're probably going to get pretty close to the nucleus of it all. You know what I mean? So when in doubt, ask why.
I totally agree with that.
But you were talking about bold action. And then we're also talking about, you know, physicality and meeting in person physically more often. And bold action you can still create action like from a phone call or from a text or by using your phone. Do you know what I mean? But where I'm trying to go with that is it just reminded me of the thing that Ben said, which is that even though him and his wife really limit individually, they limit their phone usage, at dinner every night, they come together. And I think this is bold action. It's like we've vowed to, when someone comes up in our brains from the day, like someone that had a recent success, or maybe even someone that's possibly in surgery, or someone that's a little bit sick and could use a call, like if they think about them, which we do, right? We think about people, but we don't take the extra step of like reaching out to them. They said every single time they think about someone during dinner, they'll reach out to them and call them or shoot them a text to let them know that whatever they've been thinking about them. And I just think that's a really cool thing. That to me is bold action, and it's very simple. If you can use time to your advantage while also remaining disciplined, like about phone usage and about intentionality, you can sort of use all of those and do something really special in the span of like 45 minutes. You know? What did you think about when he said that?
I mean, it reminds me of what we talked about at the beginning around like we all seek to be seen in the world. And if I think about someone, how are they going to know that I've been thinking about them unless I tell them, unless I reach out to them? And when you call someone or send them a text message, even if they don't respond, even if they don't pick up, seeing your name pop up on their phone reminds them of you, lets them know that you're thinking about them. And I think that is a form of allowing people to feel seen and reminded of. And so, I don't know, that's something I think we often can be discouraged by, like, oh, they never responded to my message. Well, it's not about you, but it's about seeing the other person. So it's okay if they didn't respond. And I don't know, maybe often we can make rash choices, like, oh, they didn't respond, so like we can't be friends anymore.
Right.
Well, I mean, we're all busy. They might send you a message back. That reciprocity and that volley is important.
Right. It's energy.
But we don't, I think, need to make it about us sometimes, which can be easy to do. Like, oh, they didn't respond to my birthday message. That's really unfortunate, and that doesn't make me feel good. Yes, and it wasn't about you. It was about wishing this person happy birthday.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. I like the way you think.
I watched an interview with Simon Sinek recently, and he talks about a friendship experiment that falls really nicely in this conversation. Thinking about the people in your life who you could call at 3 a.m, who would pick up, and vice versa. You would answer their call in the middle of the night. Pose to them the question, why are we friends? And it can be a little bit difficult to describe those things because the way that we process emotion in our brain and the way that we process language are different processes, different parts of the brain. So putting emotion into words is just simply challenging. So he talks about you might find them kind of blundering about, and eventually they will start talking about themselves. Well, you make me feel this way. The way that you hold space for me, it makes me feel XYZ. The way that I can come to you, the way that I can rely on you, the way that I can trust you. And if you notice a pattern, which you may, across these people, that's a great way to identify your purpose, because that's how you're showing up in the world and how you're showing up for other people. And when I think about purpose, that can feel like a monumental brain exercise. Like, what is my purpose in the world? That seems like the question of life, right?
For sure.
But taking this inventory of the people close to you could also give you great feedback. I mean, Dan talked about his 360 review and taking feedback from people, and he was devastated by the results and needed that kick in the ass that he actually wasn't showing up in the way that he thought.
And essentially that could be boiled down to like a question, right? Like the review to me is in a way a question. And like all these things, what you're talking about it boils down to asking questions. Do you know what I mean? Very simply.
Opening doors.
Yeah. What this really means is that by simply asking a question to someone you love, the power that it has is that it can create essentially what is your purpose.
Not create, but identify.
Sure.
Yeah.
Reveal.
Yeah.
That's big time shit.
Yeah, and I mean, Ben was sort of sharing about this in his own way, talking about when when you gain this notoriety and fame, you forget who you are. And so having friends close to you to anchor you and remind you of who you are was really important to his journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking inventory or having these conversations is beneficial both for the questioner, but also for the responder, right? You, by asking the question, are benefiting from the response.
Mm-hmm.
And the responder is benefiting from feeling seen and voicing their thoughts, their opinions, their journey, their experience.
Amen, sister. And the challenge for first me, and then you, Sam, and then the listener is to conduct research on ourselves. I think that's where a lot of things start, is by conducting research on ourselves. And this particular research starts with asking ourselves a question. That question is, what questions do you find yourself asking your friends the most often?
How did you do this research?
I looked at like the last 10 or 15 messages from different people, and if I was reconnecting with them after it had been some time, like what question was I asking them?
Mm-hmm.
So I discovered that the thing that I ask the most is a simple, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
So the next part of this challenge is another question. And that question is, what else can we ask to deepen our understanding of this person who very, very well might be our best friend, but inevitably there's going to be plenty that you don't know about them.
Mm-hmm. So I see two pathways to answering that question. One of them being, take the question that you've identified that you ask a lot, which is, how are you? What's up? How have things been?
Mm-hmm.
And simply replacing it for a more thoughtful question, thinking about what we said earlier about experience. So instead of, how are you? Which is kind of loose. Maybe there's something you've talked about recently. How are you feeling about your new job? What have you felt lately in your relationship with your son? Things that are a little bit more kind of experiential and pointed. And then the other pathway I see is adding on follow-up questions. So you can still approach the conversation the way that you always have. How are you? How are things? And then when they respond, following up with that intentional question. So you can still use, how are you feeling about your new job?
Right.
What have you been feeling lately about your relationship with your son? You can still use those questions and simply leverage them as follow-up questions.
I could see how some people might think this sounds scripted, like this sounds like it would be a script that I'd have to follow at a meeting with a friend, and it might be too much. But I think the other thing that naturally happens is that even though there's a script, like the more questions you ask them, like you're not going to be wondering like, what question do I need to pull out of my back pocket? Like the conversation will open up in probably more ways or new ways than it ever has before. And I think once you're there, you'll know where to go. So out of the questions that you brought up, are you going to ask all of those to Dania tonight? This will be Dania's first time coming over.
Well, she wants to talk to us. She has like a whole note on her phone. You're saying like it's awkward to script, but if there are things that you want to ask people, it's okay. And to me, that doesn't communicate like, oh, this girl's so cringy. It communicates to me that she wants to have a meaningful conversation and that she doesn't want to forget the things that she wants to talk about. Like it communicates intention to me.
So are you going to create a list of questions to ask Dania, or are you just going to kind of riff in the moment?
Well, I have these questions in my back pocket.
Literally.
No.
They're just in your head.
They're in my metaphorical back of brain pocket.
I need to come up with my own dinner party question.
Yeah.
I haven't really nailed one down.
I think that would be really fun.
You're going to have to help me create a good balance with it so it's not too
Well, you stole Mariah's. You have 5 fingers and they all can dispense liquid in eternity.
Who did I ask? Who did I steal it?
You stole that from Mariah.
Who did I ask though?
Evan at the bar. Tell the people the question.
It is a good one. If each finger was a spout and it could produce any sort of liquid for the rest of your life, what would it be?
What would all 5 be, but they can't change?
Right.
So I think, honestly, get on ChatGPT.
Incredible question, honestly.
Or Google. There's a list floating out there in the world that's like 100 questions to ask someone to make them fall in love with you. That works with friendship.
That's hilarious.
Pick one of those questions. We have done this. At the very beginning of our relationship, we did that set of questions. I don't know if you remember.
100?
I don't know how many it is, but there's a lot.
Do you think we went, so you're not sure if we went actually through all of it?
We went through all of them, but I don't remember
That's
the
wild.
exact number.
Wow, our attention spans were better back then.
You don't remember doing that?
Water, oil, the other three have to be like indulgent and
Is one of yours
hedonistic, but
is one
these
of
are
yours, like-
this is money. This is like,
Is one of yours chocolate?
oh hell no.
A latte?
Chocolate. Oh, I think mine's definitely, some sort of like coffee drink, like a specialty iced latte from Doppio or Little Owl.
Mm-hmm.
The other two, I can't decide, but it has to be water and something that would make me a lot of money. You said liquid gold, and that's such a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great one. I think maybe I should also have liquid gold.
I think oil is a good one.
Oil's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you don't have to put pressure on yourself to come up with these questions like literally from your brain. Get on the internet, get on ChatGPT, and Google 10 fun questions to ask at a dinner party, 10 meaningful questions to ask a friend, best questions to deepen your relationship. Like literally Google it. And from there, as we start to build the muscle, the creativity will also start to build.
Yeah. We're excited you're here. We're excited that you're listening. We appreciate you. Thanks for being here. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Love ya.
Bye. We're ditching the surface level relationships, so join us in creating something more human.
We're so happy that you're here, and we always want to go deeper with you. So we created the Something More Society. It's the go-to place to level up your connection, community, and collaboration. We have monthly book clubs, exclusive chat channels, mini episodes and Q&As with Elliot and I, and so much more.
If you're enjoying the show and want to find other ways to support, you can hit follow or subscribe on your favorite listening or viewing platform. Leaving a 5-star review would go a long way, along with a thoughtful review. Thank you so much.
Love you guys.